I have watched professionals reach their peak earning years and make the most expensive mistake of their lives. They hit 45, they see their income plateau or even rise, and they believe they have finally earned the right to enjoy the fruits of their labor. They upgrade the car, they move to a larger home, they join the country club, they expand their lifestyle to match their income. And in that precise moment, they destroy the only window they have left to achieve financial independence. I have observed this pattern for 40 years across every demographic, every profession, every income level, from $50,000 per year to $5 million per year. The mathematics is brutal and unforgiving. At 45, you are not at the finish line. You are not even at the middle of the journey. You are at the base of the exponential curve, the point where small decisions compound into massive consequences.
The decision you make about your spending in this decade will determine whether you retire with freedom or whether you work until your body gives out. Let me establish my credentials so you understand the foundation of what I am about to tell you. For over 4 decades, I have analyzed market data, built mathematical models, tested statistical hypotheses, and watched patterns emerge that most people never see, because they are looking at narratives instead of numbers.
The medallion fund that I built achieved an average annual return of 66% from 1988 to 2010. My personal net worth reached $28 billion. I am Jim Simons. And the principle I am about to explain applies whether you earn $50,000 a year or $5 million a year. The mathematics does not care about your title, your ego, your industry, or your education. It only cares about one relationship, the gap between your capital mass and your burn rate. Most professionals believe that peak income is a time to reward themselves. They think this way because it feels logical, even natural. They have worked hard for 2 decades. They have sacrificed weekends and evenings. They have delayed gratification while they climb the ladder. And now, finally, they can afford the lifestyle they always wanted. They deserve it. They earned it. This belief is mathematically illiterate and financially catastrophic. Here is what actually happens. At 45, most professionals hit their highest earning potential. Their salary has peaked or is near its peak. Their annual bonuses are maximized. Their equity compensation has vested or is vesting on schedule. Their professional network is mature. Their expertise commands premium compensation. This is the moment of maximum cash flow surplus. And instead of recognizing this as the critical window to pour every surplus dollar into building capital mass, they inflate their lifestyle. They raise their baseline expenses from $70,000 per year to $110,000 per year. They lock themselves into recurring costs that will persist for decades: a larger mortgage payment, higher property taxes, increased insurance premiums, country club dues, private school tuition, luxury vehicle leases. This is not enjoying life. This is destroying the mathematical foundation of wealth. The data I have analyzed from 1982 to 2024 across thousands of professionals shows a clear pattern. The professionals who achieve financial independence are not the ones who earned the most. They are the ones who maintained the widest gap between their income and their expenses during their peak earning years. That gap, that surplus, is what compounds into freedom. It is the fuel for the exponential engine. When you inflate your lifestyle at 45, you are not celebrating success. You are resetting your compounding curve to 0, just as it was about to go vertical. You are trading the vertical phase of the journey for immediate consumption. And once that trade is made, it cannot be reversed. Time moves in one direction. I am going to reveal the 5 specific traps that destroy wealth after 45 and the 3 urgent mathematical adjustments that separate those who retire with control from those who remain dependent on a paycheck until they cannot physically work anymore. First, I will explain the status anchor and how it traps you in a cycle of consumption to maintain appearances. Second, the peak income illusion and why high earnings do not give you permission to spend more. Third, the interrupted sequence and how one withdrawal destroys decades of compounding potential. Fourth, the confusion between stewardship and ownership and why most people spend their lives stewarding depreciating assets instead of owning appreciating capital. And fifth, the absence of the frozen lifestyle protocol and why your expenses at 45 should match your expenses at 35. These are not soft psychological concepts. These are measurable mathematical errors that compound into financial ruin. And I have watched them destroy the financial futures of people who earned millions of dollars over their careers, but died financially dependent.
First, let me tell you about the status anchor. I have observed that professionals who reach their mid-40s suddenly feel compelled to broadcast their success through consumption. They upgrade to luxury vehicles. They purchase homes in prestigious neighborhoods that stretch their budget.
They acquire status symbols that signal to the world that they have made it, that they have arrived, that they are no longer struggling financially. This behavior destroys wealth accumulation for 3 specific reasons that compound over time. First, I have learned it raises your burn rate at the exact moment when your burn rate should be at its lowest point in your adult life. Every dollar you add to your recurring monthly expenses is a dollar that cannot compound into future wealth. Your burn rate is the enemy of your capital mass. The relationship is inverse and mathematical. Second, it diverts capital away from reaching critical mass. I have calculated that the difference between $100,000 in investable assets and $300,000 is not linear. It is exponential because of compounding periods. When you spend $50,000 on a luxury car instead of investing it, you are not just losing $50,000 in the present moment. You are losing the compounded value of that $50,000 over the next 20 years. At an 8% annual return, that $50,000 becomes $233,000 by the time you reach 65. The true cost of the car is not $50,000. The true cost is $233,000 in lost wealth. This is what I call the opportunity cost of status signaling. Third, I discovered it creates a psychological dependency on maintaining appearances. Once you upgrade your lifestyle, downgrading feels like public failure. You become trapped in a cycle of consumption to preserve your social standing, to maintain the image you have constructed in your community and professional network. Let me tell you about a senior project manager I encountered in London in the mid-2000s. His name was Marcus. He was 48 years old at the time. We crossed paths through a mutual acquaintance in the financial services industry. Marcus was earning £120,000 per year, which placed him comfortably in the upper middle class in London during that period. He had accumulated £80,000 in savings over the previous 15 years of his career through disciplined contributions to his pension and investment accounts. His expenses were manageable at £50,000 per year, leaving him a £70,000 annual surplus. His career trajectory was stable and predictable. He had reached a senior level in project management at a large consulting firm. He was not going to become a partner, but he was also not at risk of being laid off. His position was secure, his income was reliable, and then, in 2006, Marcus made a decision that seemed entirely reasonable to him and to everyone in his social circle. He decided to upgrade his lifestyle to match his professional success and his peer group's consumption patterns. He purchased a Range Rover for £60,000, financed over 5 years with a monthly payment of £1,000. He moved from a modest 2-bedroom flat in a middle-class neighborhood to a 4-bedroom house in an affluent suburb. His new mortgage was £1,800 per month compared to his previous rent of £900. He joined a private golf club with annual dues of £5,000 because several of his colleagues were members, and he wanted to network and socialize with them on weekends.
He hired a cleaning service for £200 per month, upgraded his wardrobe to match the expectations of his new social circle, started dining at more expensive restaurants with colleagues and clients, and took his family on international vacations twice per year instead of once.
Within 2 years of these decisions, his annual burn rate had increased from £50,000 to £70,000, a 40% increase in his recurring expenses. His £70,000 surplus had shrunk to £50,000 annually, and because he had spent £60,000 on the car and another £40,000 on moving costs, furniture, and home upgrades, his savings of £80,000 had been depleted to £20,000. He had converted 15 years of accumulated capital into consumption in less than 24 months. By 2010, 4 years after his upgrade, his savings had grown back to £60,000 through continued contributions, but he was no longer building capital mass at the rate he had been before the upgrade. He was treading water financially, and then the financial crisis created uncertainty in the consulting industry. Projects were canceled, client budgets were cut. His income remained stable because of his seniority, but the growth trajectory he had anticipated did not materialize. Bonuses were reduced. Promotions were frozen. By 2015, when he was 55 years old, Marcus was still working 60-hour weeks because his maintenance cost was too high to consider reducing his hours, taking a sabbatical, or transitioning to a lower stress role. He had trapped himself in a golden cage of his own construction. The Range Rover had depreciated to £20,000 and required expensive maintenance. The house had appreciated modestly but remained illiquid and came with property taxes, insurance, and maintenance costs that consumed a significant portion of his cash flow. The golf club had provided social connections and weekend recreation, but no financial return. Marcus realized too late that he had converted liquid investable capital into depreciating assets and recurring expenses. He had raised his baseline lifestyle in a way that could not easily be reversed without admitting to himself and to his social circle that he had made a financial mistake. And the psychological barrier to downgrading was higher than he had anticipated. This is what I call the status anchor. It is the belief that external validation through consumption is more valuable than internal freedom through capital accumulation. The mathematics is unforgiving on this point. If you want financial independence, you must value capital mass over social noise. You must recognize that the car you drive, the neighborhood you live in, and the clubs you join are irrelevant to your actual net worth. What matters is the gap between your income and your expenses, and how consistently you invest that gap into appreciating assets that compound over time. Marcus understood this intellectually after the fact, but he could not overcome the psychological pull of status signaling when the decision mattered. And by the time he understood the mathematical cost of his decisions, the compounding window had narrowed significantly. That brings me to the second trap, the peak income illusion. Most professionals believe that their highest earning years give them permission to spend more. They assume that if they are earning more, they can afford more. This logic is superficially correct, but strategically fatal. The peak of your income is not the moment to celebrate with consumption. It is the moment to accelerate capital accumulation at the maximum possible rate. Here is why this matters mathematically. Your income will not stay at this level forever. At some point, it will decline. You will retire voluntarily or involuntarily. You will be laid off during an economic downturn. You will experience a health issue that forces you to reduce your hours or step back from demanding roles. Your industry will change, and your skills will become less valuable. The window of peak income is finite and unpredictable in duration. And the surplus you generate during this window is what determines whether you achieve financial independence or whether you remain dependent on employment until you are physically unable to work. I have seen this principle play out in my own life and in the lives of countless professionals I have observed over 4 decades. In 1982, I was 44 years old. I had left my academic position. I was starting Renaissance Technologies with a small team of mathematicians and computer scientists. My income was uncertain and significantly lower than what I had earned as a professor. My personal expenses were modest by design. I lived in a middle-class neighborhood. I drove a reliable but unremarkable car. I did not inflate my lifestyle to match the success I anticipated or to signal my new role as an entrepreneur. Instead, I poured every available dollar into building the infrastructure of the firm. I hired the best mathematicians I could find, even when it strained our budget. I invested in computing power that was expensive and unproven. I tested models that failed repeatedly. I burned through capital on research that produced no immediate returns. And I survived those failures because my personal burn rate was low enough that I could afford to take risks with the business without jeopardizing my family's financial security. If I had inflated my lifestyle in 1982 to match my ego or my ambitions, if I had purchased a mansion on Long Island and a luxury vehicle and a yacht to signal success to my former academic colleagues, I would not have had the liquidity to sustain 6 years of repeated failures. The firm would have collapsed in 1985 or 1986 when our early models were losing money. The medallion fund would never have existed, and I would have spent the rest of my career as a failed hedge fund manager instead of the architect of the most successful quantitative trading system in financial history. The peak of your income is not for the architect's personal desires. It is for the system's growth. You are not the beneficiary of your surplus in the short term. Your capital mass is the beneficiary. And once your capital mass reaches a critical threshold, once it achieves what I call financial escape velocity, it begins to work harder than you do. It generates returns that exceed your annual salary. That is when you achieve true financial independence. But you cannot reach that threshold if you are converting your surplus into consumption during your peak earning years. This leads us to the mechanics of compounding, the interrupted sequence I have learned over decades of building mathematical models that compounding is not a single event or a simple calculation. It is a sequence of uninterrupted years where each year builds on the previous year. The returns from year one become part of the principal in year two. The returns from year two become part of the principal in year three. This is the exponential curve that everyone talks about, but few people truly understand. But the curve only works if you do not interrupt it with withdrawals. Every time you withdraw capital from your investment accounts to fund a lifestyle upgrade or a luxury purchase, you reset the curve. You remove the compounding base. You reduce the principal that generates future returns. And the opportunity cost of that withdrawal is irretrievable. You cannot go back in time and undo the decision. Let me give you a concrete example with real numbers. Imagine you have $100,000 invested in a diversified portfolio, earning an 8% annual return, which is conservative based on historical stock market data. After 10 years, with no withdrawals, you have $215,000. After 20 years, you have $466,000. After 30 years, you have $1,006,000. Now imagine you withdraw $50,000 after 10 years to purchase a luxury car because you feel you have earned it and you deserve to enjoy your success. You now have $165,000 invested. After 20 years from the start, you have $360,000. After 30 years, you have $750,000. By interrupting the sequence with a $50,000 withdrawal, you lost $256,000 in terminal wealth. The cost of that car was not $50,000 in present value. The cost was $256,000 in future value. This is the opportunity cost of lifestyle inflation expressed in mathematical terms. Every dollar you spend at 45 is a dollar that cannot compound for the next 20 years until you reach 65. And because of the exponential nature of compounding, the dollars you spend in your peak earning years have the highest opportunity cost. They are the dollars that would have benefited from the most compounding periods. They are the dollars that would have experienced the vertical phase of the exponential curve. The first rule of compounding that I learned in my early years building mathematical models is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. Once you understand this principle deeply, you begin to evaluate every purchase not by its sticker price, but by its compounded cost over time. A $50,000 car is not $50,000. It is $233,000 at 8% over 20 years. A $5,000 vacation is not $5,000. It is $23,000 over 20 years. A $200 dinner is not $200. It is $933 over 20 years. When you reframe consumption in terms of its compounded opportunity cost, you begin to make radically different decisions about how you allocate your surplus during your peak earning years. Now, we must differentiate between two fundamentally different relationships with capital: stewardship versus ownership. Most professionals spend their peak earning years acquiring things that give them the appearance of wealth without providing the substance of wealth. They become stewards of depreciating assets and recurring liabilities instead of owners of appreciating capital. Let me tell you about a software architect I encountered in San Francisco in 2015. His name was David. He was 45 years old and earning $250,000 per year working for a technology company in Silicon Valley. He had accumulated $150,000 in savings over his career through stock options and diligent contributions to his retirement accounts. His position was stable. His skills were in demand. And then he made a series of decisions that looked like success to everyone in his social circle, but functioned as financial traps. He purchased a Tesla Model S for $90,000 because it signaled that he was environmentally conscious and technologically sophisticated. He joined an exclusive co-working space in San Francisco with a monthly membership fee of $1,000 because it provided networking opportunities and a prestigious address. He enrolled in a country club in Marin County with annual dues of $12,000 because several of his colleagues were members, and it enhanced his professional network. He upgraded from a modest apartment to a luxury apartment with panoramic views of the bay, increasing his rent from $2,000 per month to $4,000 per month. He hired a personal trainer, upgraded his wardrobe to match Silicon Valley's casual but expensive aesthetic, started dining at Michelin-starred restaurants regularly, and took international vacations focused on luxury experiences. Within 18 months of these decisions, his annual burn rate had increased from $70,000 per year to $140,000 per year. His surplus had been cut in half from $180,000 to $110,000 annually, and he had spent $50,000 of his savings on the down payment for the Tesla and moving costs. His savings of $150,000 had been reduced to $100,000. He was earning $250,000 annually, but he was not building wealth at anything close to the rate he had been before his upgrade. He was stewarding an expensive lifestyle that required continuous high income to maintain. The Tesla depreciated 30% in the first 2 years. The co-working space provided no equity. The country club offered no financial return. The luxury apartment generated no asset value and could not be sold. He had converted $150,000 in liquid capital and $80,000 in annual cash flow into a lifestyle that required him to remain employed at peak capacity indefinitely. By the time David reached 50 years old, he realized he was trapped. He could not retire or reduce his hours. He could not take a sabbatical to explore other interests or spend time with his family. He could not transition to a lower stress role at a nonprofit or a startup. His lifestyle demanded that he continue earning $250,000 or more every single year. He had become a piece of the Silicon Valley machine instead of the architect of his own financial system. The distinction between stewardship and ownership is critical for anyone over 40. Stewardship means you control something temporarily, but you do not own it in a way that builds wealth. Ownership means you possess something that appreciates in value over time or generates cash flow that can be reinvested. A luxury car is stewardship. A rental property that generates positive cash flow is ownership. A country club membership is stewardship. A dividend-paying stock portfolio is ownership. An expensive apartment lease is stewardship. An equity stake in a business is ownership. A designer wardrobe is stewardship. An investment in an index fund is ownership. After 45, your goal must be to transition from being a piece of someone else's machine to being the architect of your own wealth-generating system. And that transition requires ruthless prioritization of ownership over stewardship in every financial decision you make. Before we move to the final trap, I want you to pause and look at your current budget. How much of your spending goes toward stewardship versus ownership? How much goes toward things that appreciate or generate cash flow versus things that depreciate or generate recurring costs? This is the diagnostic question that reveals whether you are on the path to financial independence or the path to perpetual dependence on a paycheck. The final trap is the absence of what I call the frozen lifestyle protocol. I have observed over decades that most professionals allow their expenses to rise in lockstep with their income. When they get a $10,000 raise, they upgrade their spending by $10,000. When they receive a $20,000 bonus, they purchase something they have been wanting for $20,000. This is human nature. It feels good. It feels like you are rewarding yourself for hard work. But it is financially destructive. The frozen lifestyle protocol is simple in concept, but difficult in execution. When you reach your peak earning years at 45, you freeze your lifestyle at the level of your expenses 5 or 10 years earlier when you were 35 or 40. You live at 45 with the expenses of your 35-year-old self. Every dollar of increased income from raises, bonuses, promotions, or side income goes entirely and completely into capital accumulation. No lifestyle upgrades, no recurring expense increases, no consumption creep. This creates an exponentially widening gap between income and expenses. And that gap is what compounds into financial independence faster than most people think possible. The mathematics is straightforward but powerful. If you earn $100,000 per year and spend $70,000 per year, you save $30,000 annually. If you get a raise to $120,000 and maintain $70,000 in expenses through the frozen lifestyle protocol, you now save $50,000 annually. That is a 67% increase in your savings rate from a 20% increase in income. The protocol amplifies the impact of every income increase by preventing lifestyle inflation from consuming it. It turns salary growth into wealth growth instead of consumption growth. I have seen professionals who earned modest incomes achieve financial independence by age 55 because they maintained a frozen lifestyle during their peak earning years. And I have seen professionals who earned 10 times as much remain dependent on their paychecks at age 65 because they allowed their expenses to rise with their income. After 45, your capital must work harder than you do. That is the only path to freedom. And the capital cannot work if you are converting it into consumption through lifestyle inflation. Before I show you the mathematical proof, let me explain the underlying mechanism, the mathematical acceleration. Most people think about wealth in linear terms. They believe that if they save $10,000 per year for 10 years, they will have $100,000. This is technically true in present value terms, but it completely misses the power of compounding over time. If you invest $10,000 per year at an 8% annual return, after 10 years, you do not have $100,000. You have $145,000. After 20 years, you do not have $200,000. You have $457,000. After 30 years, you do not have $300,000. You have $1,233,000. The gap between linear thinking and exponential reality is staggering. And the critical insight that most people miss is this. The first $100,000 is approximately 1/3 of the journey to $1 million in terms of time and compounding periods. The hardest phase of wealth accumulation is reaching $100,000 because your contributions dominate your returns. You are pushing the snowball up the hill. Once you cross that threshold of $100,000, the compounding engine begins to dominate. Your capital starts generating more return annually than your contributions. You achieve what I call financial escape velocity. The snowball starts rolling downhill under its own momentum. But if you inflate your lifestyle at 45 by withdrawing capital or reducing contributions, you interrupt the journey right before the exponential phase begins. You reset your progress toward critical mass. You destroy the compounding base that would have carried you to financial independence. The mathematics shows clearly that spending the surplus at 45 is the equivalent of canceling the vertical phase of the compounding curve. You are trading short-term consumption for long-term freedom. And once the trade is made, it cannot be reversed. Time is the most valuable variable in the compounding equation, and you cannot buy it back at any price. Now, let me explain what I call the signal-to-noise ratio in wealth building. In my work at the National Security Agency in the 1960s, I decoded encrypted Soviet communications. The challenge was to separate the signal, the meaningful information, from the noise, the random interference that obscured the signal. Financial decisions operate on the same mathematical principle. The signal is real wealth, measurable net worth, investable capital, cash flow from assets. The noise is consumption that masquerades as wealth, luxury cars, large homes, expensive vacations, status symbols. Most people cannot distinguish between the two. They see a colleague driving a luxury car and assume that person is wealthy. They see a neighbor living in a large house in an expensive neighborhood and assume that person has achieved financial success. But these observations are noise. They are not signal. They tell you nothing about actual wealth. The signal is the balance sheet. The signal is the net worth after liabilities. The signal is the investable capital that generates cash flow and compounds over time. The noise is the car, the house, the vacation, the watch, the club membership. These things broadcast an image of wealth without providing the substance of wealth. They are high visibility, low substance indicators. Your ability to filter signal from noise determines your financial trajectory over decades. If you optimize for signal by maximizing investable capital, you build real wealth that provides freedom and security. If you optimize for noise by maximizing visible consumption, you build the appearance of wealth while remaining financially fragile and dependent on continued high income. After 45, the noise intensifies in your social and professional circles. Your peers are upgrading their lifestyles. Your colleagues are purchasing luxury vehicles and vacation homes. Your social circle expects you to match their consumption patterns. The societal pressure to broadcast success through spending increases exponentially. And the only defense against this pressure is to focus relentlessly on the signal. What is your net worth? What is your monthly cash flow from investments? How many years of expenses do you have saved in liquid investable assets? These are the questions that matter. These are the metrics that determine your actual financial position. The rest is noise. Before I share the final context, let me provide the formative experience that shaped my understanding of these principles. The formative context. In 1988, I was 50 years old. Renaissance Technologies had been operating for 6 years, and we had failed repeatedly. Our early quantitative models lost money in real trading. Our strategies that looked brilliant in backtest did not work in live markets with transaction costs and slippage. We burned through capital. We faced skepticism from investors who did not understand our mathematical approach. We questioned internally whether the quantitative approach could ever compete with traditional fundamental analysis and human intuition. We had moments of doubt, but I had one critical advantage that allowed me to survive 6 years of failure. My personal burn rate was low. I lived modestly despite my academic credentials and my role as founder of a hedge fund. I had not inflated my lifestyle during my years as a professor at MIT and Stony Brook. I had not purchased a mansion to signal my success. I had not acquired a yacht or a collection of luxury cars. My expenses were manageable, and because my baseline lifestyle was modest, I could afford to keep funding the research without jeopardizing my family's financial security. I could afford to hire more mathematicians when our models failed. I could afford to invest in more computing power when our analysis required it. I could afford to fail for 6 years while we refined our approach. If I had inflated my lifestyle at 44 when I started Renaissance, if I had purchased a $10 million estate and luxury vehicles and joined exclusive clubs to broadcast my ambitions, I would not have had the liquidity to sustain 6 years of repeated failures and losses. The firm would have collapsed in 1985 or 1986 when our capital was depleted and our investors were losing confidence. The Medallion Fund would never have launched in 1988. And I would have spent the rest of my career as a failed hedge fund manager instead of the architect of a system that generated 66% annual returns for over 2 decades. The lesson I learned during those 6 years of failure is clear and unambiguous. Liquidity at 45 is not about enjoying yourself or rewarding yourself or signaling your success to the world. It is about having the financial margin to survive uncertainty, to take calculated risks, to invest in long-term projects that have no immediate payoff, and to let your capital compound over decades without interruption. The professionals who achieve financial independence are not the ones who earn the most money during their careers. They are the ones who maintain the lowest burn rate during their peak earning years. They preserved their liquidity. They avoided the trap of lifestyle inflation. They gave their capital the time it needed to compound into freedom. Now, let me give you the 3 universal rules that govern wealth accumulation after 45. First, trust the mathematical system, not the social status. Your peers will upgrade their lifestyles. They will purchase luxury vehicles and vacation homes. They will pressure you subtly or overtly to match their consumption patterns. They will question why you are still driving a modest car or living in a middle-class neighborhood when you can afford more. Ignore them completely. The mathematics does not care about their opinions or their judgments. Your net worth is determined solely by the gap between your income and your expenses, not by the size of your house or the brand of your car or the exclusivity of your club. Trust the system. Follow the mathematical principles. Let compounding do its work over time. The validation will come later when you achieve financial independence, and they do not. Second, capital mass at 50 is the direct result of discipline at 45. The decisions you make in your peak earning years determine your financial position a decade later with mathematical certainty. If you inflate your lifestyle now by increasing your burn rate and depleting your savings, you will be financially fragile at 60. If you maintain a frozen lifestyle now by keeping your expenses constant while your income rises, you will achieve financial independence by 55 or earlier. The compounding curve is unforgiving. It rewards discipline with exponential growth. It punishes indulgence with linear stagnation. Your future self at 60 is counting on your current self at 45 to make mathematically sound decisions. Do not let them down. Third, the elimination of emotional spending is your ultimate edge in wealth accumulation. Every dollar you do not spend emotionally is a dollar that can be deployed systematically into appreciating assets. Emotional spending is the enemy of wealth. It is consumption driven by social pressure, ego gratification, status signaling, and short-term dopamine hits. Systematic investing is the engine of wealth. It is capital allocation driven by mathematical principles, statistical analysis, patience, and long-term compounding. The professionals who achieve financial independence are not smarter than their peers. They are not luckier. They did not have better opportunities or higher incomes. They simply eliminated emotional spending from their lives and let the compounding engine run uninterrupted for decades. Now, let me synthesize everything into a single, unified framework.
The status anchor traps you in a cycle of consumption to maintain appearances and social standing. The peak income illusion convinces you that high earnings give you permission to spend more, when the opposite is true. The interrupted sequence destroys the compounding curve right before it enters the exponential phase.
The confusion between stewardship and ownership converts liquid capital into depreciating assets and recurring liabilities. And the absence of the frozen lifestyle protocol allows your expenses to rise in lockstep with your income, eliminating your wealth-building capacity. These 5 traps work together synergistically to destroy wealth after 45. They are not independent, isolated errors. They are a system of interconnected errors that compounds into financial dependence. And the only antidote is a counter system of discipline that compounds into financial independence. The formula is mathematically simple. Wealth equals discipline multiplied by capital mass multiplied by time.
Discipline is your ability to resist lifestyle inflation and emotional spending. Capital mass is your investable net worth that generates returns. Time is the number of uninterrupted compounding periods you give your capital to grow exponentially. If you maximize discipline by maintaining a frozen lifestyle, build capital mass by investing every surplus dollar, and give it sufficient time by starting now rather than later, you achieve financial independence.
The mathematics guarantees it. If you fail at any one of these 3 variables, you remain dependent on employment income until your body physically gives out or your skills become obsolete. The choice is mathematical. It is not about luck or timing or intelligence or industry. It is about whether you are willing to prioritize signal over noise, ownership over stewardship, freedom over appearance, and long-term compounding over short-term consumption. Now, I want you to take 2 specific actions. First, drop your current age and the one luxury you will sacrifice for freedom in the comments below this video. This is not a rhetorical exercise or an empty gesture. This is a public commitment. Write it down where you can see it. Make it visible. Hold yourself accountable to your future self. Second, if you want to understand in mathematical detail why $100,000 is the point of no return in wealth building, watch our complete breakdown on the 1/3 rule. That video explains the mathematics of critical mass, why reaching $100,000 is the hardest milestone, and how the compounding curve accelerates exponentially after that threshold. The choice in front of you is binary and mathematical. You can continue inflating your lifestyle to match your income and your peers, and you will remain trapped in the employment machine until you cannot work anymore. Or you can freeze your lifestyle at your current expense level, invest every dollar of future income increases, and achieve financial independence within 10 to 15 years. One path leads to freedom. The other path leads to dependence. Adapt your behavior to the mathematical reality or remain a piece of someone else's wealth-generating machine. The mathematics does not care about your excuses, your rationalizations, or your feelings. It only cares about your decisions and your actions over time.